All right, now that the engine bay is wrapped up and things in there are pretty situated for the time being, I'm gonna move on to stuff for the transmission. So I gotta make a trans cross member, I gotta make a new trans tunnel, I gotta do a wiring harness for the backup lights, but that's kind of lower on the list of important things. So if you missed the last episode, switching from a T5 5-speed to now a much stronger TKX, should be a better transmission all the way around. I'm pretty happy to finally have this in the car after a couple years of dreaming of it. And obviously I did have to go through and cut the trans tunnel out. Not all the way, but a pretty solid chunk. As you can see, the case on this is a lot larger than the previous T5, and I had the trans tunnel that I built beforehand pretty close to the T5. So it was a 50-50 shot if it was going to actually fit in there. Let's cross my fingers it would have worked, or at a minimum just had to kind of adjust the area with the shifter, but obviously that ended up not happening. This will be the second step in the process. Step one is to make a cross member for that to hold it so I can keep it in place while I'm building the tunnel. And I've gone through over the past hour or two and kind of come up with a game plan of what I'm gonna do going forward with that. It's pretty dirty underneath the car right now, but I got things kind of set in place so I can measure and also show you guys exactly what's going on. I have the driveline angle pretty close to what I want it to be right now. It's at about 1.5 degrees. I'd like to get as close to 1 degree as possible, but the issue with that is the oil pan is so close to the rack on the rack and pinion. If I tilt it back or forward at all, it's going to be touching it or be very close to. So if I can have a gap on there like I do right now, which is maybe a 1/16 if I'm lucky, I'm going to try and keep that. So the TKX came with this cross member here from Silver Sport, but as you can see, it does not line up with the mount that it's supposed to on the transmission. I'm honestly not sure how that would work in an A-body like this. It would be nice because that would have pushed the shifter back, which I will need to do. But I have this engine pretty much set as far back to the firewall as I can with still being able to access a couple of things on the back of the head and run some wires between there. So that's got to be a tight fit if this were to work like it's supposed to there. This is pretty similar to kind of the trans mount I had to make for the T5. That was a lot more of a complicated setup just because of the case on that one, but this one should be pretty straightforward here. I'm going to go through and make a plate on the top of this because this is hollow right here. As you can see, my hand's sticking through. So I'm basically going to close that off. I'll have a plate coming forward, which should sit right on top. If I use an 1/8 inch plate, it'll butt right up against the bottom of this mount, drill 2 holes through that. So that's the basis of it, and then I'm going to go through and triangulate that, make some side plates. I got to make sure that I can still get a socket on these studs right here when I do make the side plates, so I got to keep that in mind. And then, like I said, basically make that as strong as possible, just because I don't like how tall this trans mount is. It doesn't have a whole lot of flex, but obviously with the torque of this, I don't want this to be able to move around a lot or kind of shimmy side to side. So that's the goal, just make this as strong as possible. I gotta get some shorter hardware because I don't like how long these bolts are, but we'll use it for mock-up. So I'm gonna get this on the bench now that I got my measurements, start making some templates, and start getting the main pieces welded in, and then go through and brace it up from there. Just wrapped up the transmission cross member. I didn't film much of it because when I'm welding thicker stuff, this all 1/8 inch plate right here, I run the welder at about 110 to like 115 amps. And if I have the welder plugged into the little kind of like distribution panel here, it'll trip the breaker. So I got to plug it directly into the extension cord to go above 100 amps. And then obviously there's no lights. So I was welding in the dark, but I had to do that for the motor mounts and now this. So just kind of used to it, but I would be lying if I say I'm not looking forward to going back to some sheet metal here. one day we'll have a 220 outlet, and that won't be a problem anymore. But I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. Like I said, it was a pretty simple design, but it just needed to be very, very strong, and it needed to be correct in the right spot with the correct measurements in order to get the driveline angle right. So I'm at like 1.6 degrees right now, like 1.7. It's bouncing back between that, so I can live with that. I made this plate on the back here to kind of support that mount, just because it's such a tall mount. I didn't want any flex forwards or backwards, or if it did, I didn't want it to almost like kind of fold over on itself. So I put this right there. It sits up against that mount. Obviously the studs go through there with the bolts. So once again, pretty simple design. I'm gonna go through and wire wheel all this, go ahead, prime, paint it, and then I'm gonna undercoat it as well, just because the whole bottom of the car is undercoated. That is now done. I need to get some proper hardware for that, and that'll be complete. And now it is time to move on to the other things involving the transmission here. I got both pieces cut out. I got the edges filed down, so now they're ready to start taking shape. Literally, gotta make this in the shape of a tunnel. Templates turned out pretty good here, so I'm happy with that. Like I said, this will be two pieces, so this piece obviously will go on the back of that. You can see that's going to be the notch for the shifter right now until I kind of decide what I want to do. If I'm going to make a piece up here, that way the shifter can unbolt from the top or bottom. Not totally sure yet. I am going to leave that piece still attached to the rear piece, and I'll cut it out once it's formed. Otherwise, if I cut this out right now and then I go to bend it, this piece can kind of slide off to the side, that angle can kind of slide off to the side, and this won't get much of a radius. It'll just put a bend kind of in this section, and this side will still be flat here, whereas I need the whole thing to bend. I do have a benchtop English wheel, but these pieces are a little too big to be used on that. So I got a fire extinguisher here that I'm going to use as basically the English wheel. I'm just going to kind of form it around the shape of this right here. This is only 18 gauge, so it's not super thick. It should be fairly easy to bend. So I'm going to start off in the center, kind of go around this radius right here, and then the corners will probably have to come down on a tighter radius. But once I have a center bend in there, you can kind of do that in the corner of the table. So got one shot at this. If I do mess up, I have that giant sheet right there, so I can make another, but I would really prefer not to. I'm gonna go slow and see what we can't make happen here. we have it. The transmission tunnel is 100% built and welded in. I just finished cleaning up the underside of the tunnel and painting that, so that's all primed and painted. I lowered the trans as much as I could, and then I ended up just scotch-brighting it and then just painting it by hand. So did some self-etching primer, some satin black, and then if I can lower the trans as far as I did to paint that, I'll throw a cover over it and then undercoat the bottom side of the tunnel. That way it matches the rest of the floor, which I'd really like to do. But in terms of welding this, it was definitely a challenge. I decided to TIG all this, and obviously, you know, you can't sit in here or stand up, so I was welding with the pedal under my elbow, under my knee, between my thighs, like anything you can think of pretty much. So just trying to get used to that, which is good practice for things on the Charger once it comes to the chassis and tube work side of things. I definitely could have MIG'd that, and considering the time crunch, it probably would have been the faster route, but this is, once again, good practice for the future. Stayed up pretty late last night to knock that out and wrapped it up this afternoon here as well. Next step for this is to go through and DA it. I got to do a little bit of hammer work. I got most of it straightened out. There's like 2 or 3 spots that I want to get a little bit better, knock down the welds as much as I can, and then we're going to go through and start the bodywork phase of things and hopefully get this section of the tunnel done over the next night or 2. Starting to wrap up the last few things on the headers here, which just involve the collectors. So I got to go through, put the O2 bung in. Just doing one on the driver's side because the Holley harness just has one O2 sensor. I may add a second one in the future, but we're just going to stick with one for now. So got the bung right here, got the hole drilled out and positioned. I had to order this bolt to go in there, that way it doesn't warp the threads when I go to weld it. So put that in there, weld that on, that'll be set, and then I got to go through and trim it back. I think I got to look at my measurements, but it was either like an 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. And once I get that trimmed, I can go through and put the V-bands on. So these are just some Mishimoto stainless V-bands. These obviously are just going to sit on here just like that, and then it gives me a nice lip to weld down there. So I've seen some people just do this without filler and some with filler, so I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet. I'll probably do it without filler pretty good, but I feel like you can see that gap right there because this doesn't totally perfectly center in there, so there might be some filler needed. Oof, I don't know quite yet, figure that out as I go. But step 1 is getting this guy in, getting them trimmed to length, and then weld this half the V-band on. I got the O2 bung and this side of the V-band flange welded on the collectors, so they're both complete now. Pretty happy with the way that they turned out. Was a little bit worried on the V-band side of things because this is a much thinner material than the flanges, but I ended up using some filler rod, just took my time. Turned out pretty good. My goal was to be consistent on those and be smooth and blend the starts and stops in. So I was trying to focus on that as well as not have the weld dip over this edge right here. So I'm, like I said, pretty happy with the way that they turned out there. The O2 bung was not super tricky. Just had to go slow because I did not want to warp the threads or mess that up at all. Obviously, this side of the V-band will get welded on the exhaust once the time comes for that. And then I got 2 more that will be on the more rear section of the exhaust. So a couple more chances to get better at that and improve on those. But now that these are complete, I'm going to go ahead and toss them back on the headers, get the springs back on them, and then toss them on the engine and in the new engine bay for the first time. A couple different updates between the trans tunnel and then the headers. I started on some body work for the trans tunnel. Basically, I just wanted to get it kind of roughed in and get some primer on it to call it good. Make sure everything was obviously sealed up. After this trip, I want to do some stuff to the interior in here anyway, so I figured I'm not going to paint it ahead of time just because I'm going to have to tear the seats back out and a couple other things for what I want to do. So I'll go through and paint it then, that way it'll be all fresh. But I'm happy with the way this turned out. I got the hole around the shifter just kind of, like I said, roughed in. I want to go through and make kind of like a cap piece or a trim piece to go around the outside, because if the tunnel is going to be painted orange, I think it would look cool if there was something around the shifter boot maybe. So I still got some thinking to do on that, but that tunnel is a lot larger than the previous one. I also got rid of the 4-speed hump that was on that side there. So once it's all painted and the bodywork's complete, like I said, it should look a lot better, but I'm happy with where it's at for now. Underneath the car, obviously the cross member is all the way installed. I still have to get one more bolt, but I got 3 of them in for right now. It's all undercoated. That turned out really nice, so I'm very happy with that. The headers are all wrapped up and installed as well, so the V-bands are welded on this end, and then the O2 bung there, ran the harness for that. Made a backup light harness for the transmission. Got the transmission filled up with fluid, so pretty much everything transmission related is complete. Drive shaft is installed with the new U-joint and the new yoke. I was also able to lower the transmission enough to paint the bottom side of the tunnel and then undercoat it as well, so it's kind of hard to see since it's a little dark right now, but that was something I was kind of concerned about, but I was happy I was able to accomplish there. Other than that here, I think everything underneath the car looks pretty good. I'm happy with how the headers look, and clearance wise with everything. New blow-proof bell housing is looking good right there, so everything clears for the most part. Got the wires going down to the starter, all wrapped in some DEI heat protection. Same with the fuel line that runs right along the frame rail right there. So when it comes time to make the exhaust, this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky, because you can see the factory kind of, I guess, notches in this cross member are obviously not where the headers are. So I got a couple different options. Is I can have the exhaust turn out here, or I can notch this. If I were to go through and notch this, it also gives me a chance to get rid of the torsion bar kind of mounts, if you want to call them that, right there. So that's gonna be something coming up for this week. I'm not gonna get to that in this video here. And this is the first time that the completed headers are on the new engine in the new engine bay, so that was pretty cool to see. Happy with the clearance of the motor mounts there, so everything looks good on that end. Plug wires got clearance. I was able to put the plugs in, not a problem. New catch can system with a new catch can, so I got that all mounted and routed. Had to make a couple brackets for that. Header on the driver's side is looking good as well. I just have the steering column, or I just have the steering shaft kind of mocked up for right now. I got to get some hardware and then paint that, but it does clear it. Got plenty of space for this motor mount here as well, so it's all starting to come together there. As of today, I got exactly 1 week left until we're supposed to actually be down in Bowling Green for Power Tour. So I would like to leave within the next 5 days, maybe 6 days. We'll just kind of see. I still have yet to start the car or drive it, obviously. Finally got all the tubing in for the exhaust, so I think I should have time to make that this week, as long as there's no issues once I actually start or drive this car. There's going to be obviously little things, but if there's nothing major, we should be okay to make an exhaust system. I know it may not seem like a lot of stuff, but between trying to make this work to go on a road trip between school and work, there's not a whole lot of time to actually work on this. And I have made a couple mistakes so far due to being a little bit sleep deprived, but It's all right. It's just how it goes, part of it. Right now, I'm actually gonna go ahead and toss a tune in this thing and then hopefully fire it up sometime tonight, if not tomorrow. Try to get things rolling for this week here. So that's gonna be the start of the next video, something to look forward to, but I am very happy with the way that the transmission tunnel, the transmission cross member, and the headers have turned out for this week's projects.